Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the FEO 2021 Virtual Summit and Tuesday Talks with FEO. I'm Debbie Mann, if you don't know that, and your host for this hour. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Rebecca will be doing her presentation and I will be asking some questions, but if you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask her, just put them in the chat and I'll make sure that she hears them. Before I introduce our guests, we'd like to we couldn't do this without our partners and our sponsors for this 2021 summit. So first I'd like to thank TicketPro, SmartServe, Event Hub, Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture, OLG, and Destination Ontario. Thank you so much for what you do to support us in this industry. So today, our guest is Rebecca MacKenzie of Culinary Tourism Alliance. Welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Debbie, and all the folks at FEO for having me. It's a pleasure to join all of you today. And I thought I would kind of get things going by giving a little bit of a background around the Culinary Tourism Alliance for those folks who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting that are on today's session.
Perfect. So, that was my first question.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yay.
Well, I've given you a couple of resources on the screen. So we are a not-for-profit organization that was established back in 2006 to implement the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sports 10-year culinary tourism strategy. It was a 2000 to 2015 strategy. And we did so, we completed that strategy in 2015, and in 2016 we dropped our O because we used to be known as the Ontario Culinary Tourism Strategy. We dropped our O because the various services that we provide go beyond the borders of Ontario. Now, having said that, Ontario Culinary is our consumer website. And then Culinary Tourism Alliance is our industry website. And you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Ontario Culinary. And on Instagram, you can also find us at Culinary Tourism Alliance. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to go through some of the different things that we do and why we do them. So as a membership-based organization, destination marketing organizations, regional tourism organizations, sector groups and commodity groups, as well as post-secondary educational institutions, pay an annual memberships to the Culinary Tourism Alliance. And as a result, our focus is to help share and tell their taste of place stories. And in fact, right now, of course, we're all sort of still in the stay-home order state of mind, while some parts of the province are further ahead than others. I'm actually based here in Toronto, where we're still on very strict restrictions, but I do know other parts of the provinces that are starting to lift. However, still a lot of resident sentiment for not encouraging travel. So, but when the time is right, and we're working very closely with Destination Ontario, we'll kick back into our Great Taste of Ontario, which is the largest tourism recovery program that's being delivered with over 90 partners, destination marketing organizations and RTOs, with funding support from both Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs at the federal level through the Regional Relief Recovery Program. This program is slated to run at a minimum to the end of this year, end of December, and it's really designed to encourage Ontarians to fall back in love with all of our great tastes. There are passports that consumers can download for different destinations, different itineraries that give them a sense of what they can do over a day, a weekend, and a week to really rediscover all of our great tastes and do so safely. There's motivation through the passport program that encourages visitors when they are in market to check into businesses, and as a result, when they've reached a certain number of check-ins, they get loyalty points that get them really great Taste of Ontario gifts, including Made in Ontario artisan products, gift certificates at our Feast on certified restaurants, as well as they can contribute donations to both Food Share and Second Harvest, recognizing that for many Ontarians, returning to travel is going to be something of a challenge because of the economic strain they're under, and just even accessing food is a challenge for many people right now. So that's one example of the things that we do. You heard me mention the Feast On program, Debbie, and that is a program, it's a certification program that recognizes restaurants based on their significant procurement of Ontario grown and raised ingredients. And so on the front end, we're giving consumers direction on where they can dine out or take away or get delivery from restaurants that are really committed to our farmers, our winemakers, craft brewers, and craft distillers. Within the program, we also do a lot of work to connect the growers and producers with the food service industry, because one of our primary goals is to really bridge the gap between the food, the drink, and the travel industries. And as part of the Great Taste of Ontario this year, we're waiving all of the fees to restaurants in order to become certified. It's typically $350 a year, but that fee is being covered through the Great Taste of Ontario. As well, for growers and producers who have the capacity to sell into food service, we call those preferred purveyors. We're waiving the fees for them as well. So for those farmers, viticulturalists, craft brewers, craft distillers who are interested in getting their product into food service, this is a great time to make those connections. And certainly it's a big part of building resiliency within the industry as we move forward. And the program is from all across the province. So we have certified restaurants from Southeastern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, and all up to Northern Ontario as well. And then the other sort of pillar of work what we do is we have a social enterprise consultancy within the organization that works with destinations across the province, the country, and around the globe to help them grow their communities through food and agritourism. You've probably heard me switch between culinary tourism and food tourism, Debbie. It's all the same thing. Now, certainly agritourism is actually a subsect under culinary tourism, and it's a segment of the industry that's quickly growing as we recognize the consumer's desire to have more connection with their taste of place. So we've been working, as an example, closely with Indigenous Tourism Ontario and Destination Northern Ontario on an Indigenous culinary tourism strategy. We've been working with the Tourism Industry Association of Canada on delivering elevating Canadian experience workshops literally across the country. Today is, I think, the last one I'll be delivering. So we delivered 50 in the last 10 months. And we're doing one-to-one coaching with different business operators to really help them understand how they can not only offer more of a taste of place within their business operations, but improve their storytelling, create new partnerships. And for those that are in agriculture, look at agritourism as a way to grow their business. So we're definitely busy. I'd be remiss in saying that I'm not a one-woman show. I have a great team of 12. So within our professional services, we have Trevor Benson as our VP of Destination Development. We have Caroline Morrow is a Senior Destination Development Officer. We have Camilo Montoya Huelva, who is our Research and Evaluation Officer. James Artiega is a Research and Evaluation Coordinator, as is Nastasha Ali. And we have another Senior Destination Development Officer, Martin LaSalle. From our communications side, our Director of Communications is Agatha Podgosky. Some of your folks on the call may have met Agatha before. She's our dynamic comms. She leads our dynamic comms team and works on all of our websites, delivers workshops, and manages all of our communication channels with the support of our digital media coordinator, Robert Elliott, and our communications coordinator, Danusha Prasad. And then our Feast On program is one program that's managed by Valerie Keast, our program manager. And we're building out a culinary cultural diversity program as well as part of the Great Taste of Ontario. And Valerie has a great team of Zoe Galenis as our engagement coordinator and John Keane as our certification analyst. So as you can see, we've got a small but mighty team doing lots of great work across the province. So for the benefit of the folks on today's session, I thought I'd talk a little bit more about culinary tourism and what it takes to bridge that gap between the food and drink and tourism industries. I don't know about everybody else, but I sure can't wait until we can get out into a farmer's field like this and have a great taste of place. I would be remiss if I didn't start with really talking about what does culinary tourism mean. And so it really is any experience where a person can interact with the food and drink that reflects the local history, the heritage, and the culture of a place. So it goes way beyond just dining out. And in fact, I thought I'd share this slide with everybody just so they could understand where they might fit culinary tourism value chain. So, and this is a terminology we use often. Really, the value chain is about where you find yourself within the value chain and how you can connect with others in the value chain to help round out and develop and deliver experiences to the consumer that really do connect them with their taste or taste of place. So we start by looking at farmers through typically sort of three lenses. One is, do they have an on-farm experience where a visitor can come and either learn and taste or do both at the same time? We look at farmers markets because those are an incredible way to get connected to a destination's culture as well as their food culture. And then we also look at, do they work with local restaurants or even local festivals and events? You know, do they have pop-ups? Do they take a place within festivals and events? Then of course we do look at restaurants, everything from food trucks to fine dining. We look at accommodations, typically through the lens of their food and beverage offering. We look at cooking schools and culinary tours. We look at specialty food retailers and added value food and beverage processors. So wineries, breweries, cideries, distilleries, bakeries, artisan cheese producers. And then last, but certainly not least, we look at festivals and events. And I think, you know, to be very clear, we don't just look at food festivals events or beverage festivals events. We look at festivals events and events also through the lens of what kind of food and beverage offering do they have, and how can you take, you know, an arts festival or a music festival or a literary festival and embed that taste of place experience within them and make that part of the culinary tourism value chain. Before I go on, Debbie, just wanted to ask if there's any questions of the audience just to get clarification on and make sure that they see where, as a festival event, they can fit into the culinary tourism value chain.
Nope, not as of yet.
Okay, great. Well, let me see here, move on. So, you know, obviously the last almost a year now, we're coming up to it, has been a major shock for not only the food and beverage sector, but also for the tourism sector and of course the festival and event sector. And we as an organization, we've been very closely working with FEO and a number of other tourism industry sector organizations to have a voice on understanding what the industry is going to need to recover, but also to be listening to what's happening. So as members of both the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, we're also members of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And we're seeing and getting a really good sense of what the future of culinary tourism is going to look like, knowing that, you know, first and foremost, it'll be our own sort of regional borders that we open up to, and then we'll expand to more national borders and in time, you know, borders to the US and international destinations will open. And what we know across the globe is that when people return to travel, because that is inevitable, the desire to seek that human connection is significant. You know, we've all spent enough time in our four walls with our same family members, or in some cases, people who've been alone. And really, it is going to be about getting out and getting connected. The other thing that we have seen, and of course, many of your guests on today might even have fallen victim to the baking craze, but there's lots of people who've taken this opportunity being at home to really reconnect with food, to get back into cooking, to learn more about their local providers. And this is really, you know, in addition to that consumer interest, there's also an industry interest in sort of really rethinking about our food systems, you know, understanding that this is a paradigm shift and there's changes that we do need to make. And certainly for many consumers, especially in large urban centers, that seeking that human connection will also be about going to the source of the food system. It'll be getting out to rural destinations. It'll be having those agritourism experiences. It'll really be about connecting to the place. And again, that's not Ontario specific or Canada specific. That's globally what we're seeing destinations realizing, and that this rise of experiential tourism is going to be key for several reasons. You know, for those that have the privilege and can afford to travel, they, you know, definitely look at ways to immerse themselves through experiences. And then for those that are going to be more financially struggling, you know, what little dollars they will have, they'll have high expectations to, again, to take away a really meaningful experience. Now, the one thing about culinary tourism that is different from many different, from other sort of niche tourism offerings is that when delivered and developed right, it is a multi-sensory experience. So it's touching on all 5 of your senses. And while it might not be the primary reason a visitor comes to a destination, when a visitor has a great taste of place experience, it can be the primary reason that they talk about their experience with their friends, their family, what they share on social. And it can be a significant factor in the return visitation of that visitor. So that's one key thing to think about, is if you're not already connected to that, this is a great way for future thinking.
So Rebecca, just on that, I went to Italy in 2018, and one of the things that we did was we did a culinary experience where we went and learned how to make pasta and pesto, and drank wine, and we did all different kinds of things as a group, and it was so much fun, and it was such a great experience. It's something that I think we don't always look at.
Well, you know, it's funny. I mean, you mentioned Italy. So lots of people, when they think about food tourism, they think about places like Italy, which is sort of, you know, the motherland of taste of place in terms of celebrating their food culture. But, you know, here in Ontario, you know, you can go to Little John Farm in Prince Edward County and do a team building experience where you can literally harvest the vegetables out of their garden, you know, meet the animals that they raise, and then you can cook together. You can take a cooking class together and then all sit around outside and enjoy your fabulous meal together. You can you do wine tours, obviously, all across the province, but or wine tastings, but you can go deeper than that. And many wineries do offer more of an immersive experience where, you know, you're meeting the winemaker, you're having that guided experience to understand a little bit more about the process. You know, you can go to Guns Hill Dairy in Oxford County and take a cheese making class. There's no limit to the types of experiences that we have here in Ontario. The challenge is, and this is what we're doing with the Great Taste of Ontario, is getting Ontarians and Canadians to realize they don't need to cross the pond to have those kind of experiences that one would expect to have in Italy. You can have them right here in our home province. And that actually leads into this next point, that driving trips will be prioritized over flying. You know, until there is this mass distribution of the vaccines and countries are feeling safer to let people come and go. Also recognizing that for many, they won't have the privilege of the time to have to quarantine that many countries are currently implementing. So those driving trips are going to be huge. And as you know, Debbie, there's nothing like on a road trip coming across the unexpected and stopping in and finding little delights, like whether it's, you know, the best butter tart in Ontario or the best ice cream cone, or, you know, driving all the way from Toronto to Windsor just for their pizza. Because if you haven't heard about Windsor pizza, well, I encourage all of you to Google it, because it is a thing.
Well, and even I went to Collingwood, and one of my delights was watching wild turkeys cross the road. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but it was really exciting. And not that I was going to do anything about it, but all local, right?
Yeah, just seeing that was funny. Just on a side note, a couple of years ago on Indy 88, a radio station here in the city, they had a turkey gobbling contest on the radio, and I called in and I won. So I won't do it right now because this is being recorded. But for anybody who is interested to learn your gobbling skills, I love it. Whenever I drive a country road and see turkeys in the field, I gobble, and my whole family thinks I'm a lunatic. So
we'll do it
having
at the
said
end
that,
so Jay can cut it out.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's there's so many parts of this province. Like, that's one of the fascinating things that I've found in my 13th year with the Culinary Tourism Alliance. I have done a lot of the province. I know I still have lots to do, but it is huge. If you think about it, 8 Irelands fit into Ontario.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yes. And actually, really excitingly, one of the projects we've been working on this year that will launch this spring is we've worked with the Greenbelt Foundation to take all of their 40 hiking trails and cycling trails and connect taste of place experiences with those trails and those routes. And so coming this spring, there'll be about 40 different, culinary trails. There's criteria in terms of distance from the hiking trail or the cycling trail that makes it easy for visitors to Ontario and Ontarians to really understand how they can make a day or a weekend to stay and play. And that's another piece here, is that rural and remote destinations. They certainly, they're going to be busy, and simply because they're seen as safer, B, they're more accessible. They get that driving piece obviously connected to that, and they definitely they're more sort of, again, that whole idea of getting out of the city, getting out of your 4 walls, connecting with nature. The other piece in here that's really important is just responding and communicating responses to safety concerns. And for those of your guests today that aren't familiar with the safe travel stamp that TIO has implemented. So it's a stamp that's through the World Travel Tourism Council, and the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario is the approved organization in Canada to distribute that safe travel stamp. It is free through the TIO membership, and I believe TIO membership is still being offered free. So for those festivals and events that aren't members of TIO, I'd encourage them to become a member and to do the research about the safe travel stamp, because it's going to be all about when you can go back to putting an event on, showing that you're adhering to all the protocols and that you're taking all the steps to think about everything that's going to make somebody nervous and give them the reassurance that you're going to keep them safe. And of course, those outdoor experiences are going to be in high demand. So that's where, when I talked about agritourism, for some of your festival and event organizers, this is where they might want to really think about, if they're not already working in partnerships with different growers and producers, where's the opportunity for them to do so? And can it even be a pop-up event that's prior to or after your main event? Can it be programming that you add to your event, even if it's off-site? There's different ways of looking at how to leverage this type of consumer interest in our taste of place.
Can I ask you a question, Rebecca? Are you finding that this is encouraging people to learn where their food is coming from? Because there's a lot of people who, like a lot of kids, don't really understand where they think that it grows in the grocery store.
Yeah, and Debbie, that's where I sort of was referring back to, that there's more interest in where our food is coming from and having that connection to food. There's an interest to meet the farmer, meet the producer. It's not just kids who don't know where our food comes from. I can remember a couple of years ago doing an event with a chef who was like, oh, I can just get some oranges at the food terminal. And I was like, just because you're buying them at the food terminal doesn't mean we grow them here. Oranges don't grow in Canada. So, it's also interesting is that, a lot of people will make the assumption that just because kids grow up in rural areas means they know about farming. That isn't the case either, necessarily. So it really, this is where I also think when it comes to food, we're all kids at heart. And, it is something that can not only connect people to place, but it's a great way where people connect. If we think about all of our favorite travel memories, you probably are going to get pulled back into a memory of, oh, when I was having this drink, or when I was having that meal, or when I attended this event and I was trying this, it takes you back, because again, it's multisensory and it has a much higher likelihood of sticking in our memory because of that. So I was thinking, in terms of some questions to put out to the audience, and just sort of using these as primers to think about, how are you currently featuring food and beverage at your festival and event? And does that food and beverage tell the story of your destination's taste of place? And then, something that I think is of more importance, and this speaks to an earlier comment I made about developing a culinary cultural diversity program, is getting more of our province and our destinations to really think about, is the offering reflective of the diversity of food cultures in your destination? Here in Toronto alone, there's over 260 different ethnicities that are recognized through our various food services. So you can have a taste of the world in Toronto, and in many cases, the food is better than that you would experience in the origin country, because the quality of our ingredients are so great. So, as much as, yes, locally grown and raised ingredients are really important, and locally grown and raised food is part of our story, there's also the people who prepare the food and the styles in which they are influenced. And I think that that's something that's really, really important, and we all have room to improve on moving forward. So those are just some primers that I put forward to your audience, and would love, if there's any questions about that, to pause for a moment and take any.
There's nothing there yet, but I was just thinking, so I know that I read somewhere that there is a festival in Canada, but I'm thinking of the Ukrainian festival here in Toronto. In I think it's Winnipeg, they have a baking where they bake, they call them bubas. Is that your grandmother in Ukraine? Well,
oh yeah, okay.
So can tell I'm not Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Oh, bubliki, that's it. And they come and they teach people how to bake the bread, and it's really, thank you, Christina. It's really again, multi-sensory, but a lot of fun apparently. And that whole event just has people traveling from around the world just to come and experience that. So it would be great if people could, within their festival, I know it'll be a little harder because it's outdoors, but offering that kind of experience. And yeah.
Well, actually, I think outdoors is, if it's set up properly, is not any more limiting than indoors. And I can say, I've seen some really, really interesting programming as festivals, events, and even culinary schools and culinary tours have had to shift their operations to online. My colleagues took a dumpling making course online, and it was free. It ended up being about 3 hours long, which they said might be a touch longer than the average person would attend, but it was because it was super immersive, and it was a very, very detailed, very complex dishes to make, the dumplings. But that's just one example of they had a packed room, they had lots of people engaged, and there are ways of delivering things so that you can still think about the protocols, but also give people maybe it's not the full immersive experience of creating something, but at least get them doing something that's somewhat tactile, so they feel like they're contributing, for sure. And I think that just one example that we're probably all familiar with is taffy on snow. I mean, that seems like the simplest thing to do. And there will be some restrictions, there will be some challenges as we navigate through the coming months and years to manage, health and safety. But there's lots of creative ways to move in the space while still being very mindful of the protocols.
Well, that brings up another question. Sorry, I know, there's been a lot of conversations about, doing, once we get back to face and meeting together, how would you marry both technology, so the hybrid of live streaming or these kind of meetings. How and culinary in a festival. I mean, I think that's a really great option as well. And your reach would be greater. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we've all come to realize now is that there will have to be hybrid models, because even you know, we're just going to have to mitigate any potential risk. And I think, you know, so first and foremost is one, making sure that you budget accordingly for your AV. When it comes to cooking demos and cooking experiences or culinary experiences, you need to make sure that you've got the right setup so that when you're capturing content that's going to allow somebody who's not there in person to still be able to really get a sense of what is being demonstrated, what's being taught, that, you know, that you've invested enough in the AV so that they can actually see it properly. You've got good sound. So I think that, you know, for forecasting future budgets, that's really important. But that's also where you can look at partnering with different organizations to help you with that. And think about, like, if you don't already have a partnership with your community college, how could you work with them to either access some of their culinary space, or in some cases, some of the community colleges have really great media programs where you could access their media students to help you in setup. So, you know, there are, I know, because I've been, you know, in the festival and event industry myself for going on 23 years now, and I know that sometimes the budgets can be challenging, but I also do feel that when support is available, that technology is something that will be realized by the funders and will be something that's more eligible to access some support for. But I do think you want to think outside the box in terms of the kind of partners that you can look for to help create dynamic programming. The other kind of several ideas that I wanted to share with you and thoughts moving forward was also this going beyond the gate of your festival and event to create taste of place takeaways. So this is one of the things that we did with the Terroir Symposium last year when we had to move from an in-person to, we created taste boxes. So we worked with our sponsors and different program partners to put together these amazing, incredible Taste of Terroir boxes that in the ticket pricing, we had just an online ticket separate, and then we had the ticket with the takeaway box, and we could deliver those. Now, the challenge we did have is we could only deliver them in Ontario because they had alcohol in them, and you can't deliver beyond the borders of the province due to our, you'll hear me say this, yes, archaic liquor laws and just moving alcohol from one province to another in Canada. And hopefully we will evolve in time so that we can become more supportive of our other provinces and territories. But this is something I've seen some brands move to, some different festivals and events move to. We also, as an example, we partnered with the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario at their summit this year. And I pitched them this crazy idea that thankfully they took up, and then Landon Logie actually had to execute. And it certainly was challenging, but for those folks who bought a gala summit ticket, they got a meal delivered to their home from Feast on Certified restaurants. And it was not only a great way to add value to the summit experience, but it was a really, really great way to keep money moving in those local communities. All of the dollars that were brought in for that went directly back to the restaurants, which was so significant in these challenging times. So, you know, again, I would encourage the folks on today's session to really think outside that box. Think about what they can do to keep the dollars in the local economy and pay it forward.
Where can they find a list of Feast on certified restaurants? Because that would be great if even for like Valentine's Day was here, and it would be would have been great to be able to order something from one of our partners there.
Yeah, so if you go to ontarioculinary.com, you'll be able to see on the main screen, and I can certainly show you this after the screen share, after I've done my presentation, I can pull that up so you can see the URL link. It lists all the restaurants, which again is constantly growing. So we're always bringing in new restaurants into the program. And yeah, you know, this is again, there could be ways that you could partner. Instead of, if you didn't have a food and beverage on site at your festival event, how could you create a feast on, dine around in your community and work with restaurants who showcase that taste of place, again, as an added value opportunity for your festival or event goer. There is one piece that I really do want to talk about that I think is important, is this paying for talent. And I know for many, many years, we were victim, or we're not victim, we did it ourselves, is when we were having events, we were asking people to show up for free for the marketing exposure. And many did, and many may still, but I think we have to realize and recognize that many won't have that same sort of capacity to do so moving forward. The restaurant industry is in a very precarious situation, and so over the past couple of years, for at least the last 3 years, anytime we've had chefs participate in different events or show up to share their talents with us, we've paid a per diem to have them come and do that, and also cover their food costs. And I think that's at a minimum what people should be thinking about moving forward. It's going to be some time again before that marketing is really something that they're going to value more than getting paid, because it's not just, you know, you're taking them off site, off their restaurant. And if that's, you know, if that's not something they're programmed to do, then it really becomes a challenge. And, you know, I think so many of them right now are just so focused on making sure they can keep their doors open that it's key. So again, this is sort of where I speak to that, driving business to them, figuring out even to ways to incorporate them even if they aren't on site with you, so that it's really about a way to keep your community restaurants and culinary talent in the community by helping them. And I think that's where it sort of speaks to my last point here, was the creating that value added experience. It's also something to be super mindful of. And I know a lot of people are going to get into the mindset of, well, we've got a discount. No, we don't. We have to add value. We have to add value. So, and the reality is there's going to be pent up demand for people to get out and do things and go to events and celebrate. And we know that we're not going to be returning to the same numbers that we might have been able to host previously because of the protocols. So, you know, there are times and places where you're going to keep things as accessible as possible. And then there's times and places where you can charge a VIP price to give that added value that not only will help you meet your budget targets, but also make sure that you're leveraging the opportunity to really tap into that hunger for connection to place, if you will, pardon the pun. So those are sort of some of the tips that I had. I might take my screen share off for just a minute, and I'll pull up for the benefit of the audience our webpage so they can see what I was referring to with regards to where to find the Feast On program. I'd also encourage anyone today to make sure that they take time to let us know when their festival and event is getting back up and running, and share with us how they're showcasing Taste the Place, so that we can you know, help put that out in our consumer channels and on our social channels, and really, you know, celebrate the return of your festivals and events.
Perfect.
So just bear with me here. My internet is working at the pace of a snail today.
No problem.
So I'm just trying to pull this open for you. And
does anybody
any
have
questions at all for the folks?
Don't see any right now, Rebecca, from the audience. Does anybody have any questions for Rebecca? You can type it in, and if you want, maybe you can unmute yourself too and ask the question. So, you know, you mentioned a couple of things. You know, food isn't as easily accessible to people. What does that, you know, the food security, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think so. There's a couple of pieces around that, and that's the access to food. So for some who are experiencing financial crisis in this time period, it's about the ability to actually afford to get good, nutritious food. Food security is about having the ability to feed ourselves in the case of a crisis, that we actually produce enough food to feed our communities. And so continuing to support our farmers and ensure that those that are focused on the local market have the drive and not only that, they have the consumer support for their products. I'm just going to share with you quickly and pull this up here. You'll be able to see, this is our Feast on restaurant. So it's actually, I'm experiencing a bit of a lag on my internet today, but when you go in, you'll be able to see, so it's loading. You can go in and see who's doing takeout, who's doing outdoor dining, who's doing online reservations. You can apply filters. Slowly you'll see a map of Ontario. But this is a great resource to find those restaurants that are committed.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, that's great, because I'd love to do something like that here locally in Kitchener, Waterloo, and order locally.
There's quite a few in Kitchener, Waterloo. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good.
Great.
You also, does anybody have any questions? I don't see any. Oh, Rebecca offered some great suggestions for festival. Who is that from? Oh, Kyle. Rebecca offered some great suggestions for festivals and events to bring the desire for connection to place and meaningful experiences through culinary experiences at their festival. Can you share any great examples you've seen of culinary partnerships experiences on site for festivals that may not be culinary focused?
Well, I've certainly seen different music festivals, art festivals, and even literary festivals that have incorporated culinary into their programming. The literary festivals are pretty easy because you can kind of get that whole idea of the cookbook and getting the chef to come in. I'll give you a tip that if it's a year where a chef has released a cookbook, they're looking for tons of opportunities for exposure and marketing and promotion. So they'll often show up and you won't have to necessarily pay their typical fee because they're looking for promotional opportunities. If you want to kind of get in with a good publishing house and see where that opportunity exists, that can be all different types of festivals and events, actually, depending on the theme of what you're doing. Certainly, when we look at music festivals, this is a great opportunity, especially to bring in different culinary cultures and showcase them either through food stalls or food trucks or pop-ups. There's also, and it's great, I'm seeing here in the chat some of the other things. Kira's bringing up Northumberland Eats. It's a program supporting local restaurants and food security. Yep. And I can see Dave's put in that, KW Oktoberfest, there's Stein and Dine, great example. So yes, in terms of, Julia, your question about outdoor culinary events hosted in natural green spaces, yep, 100%. There's been different programs that have been put on with parks, with different conservation areas, on farms. And so in fact, Debbie was asking me before the call got started, what are our plans? And we're actually going to put on some very, very small events later this year. We're going to do some consumer events as well as industry events focused on the Feast On program. The consumer events are going to be very immersive, very experiential, connecting the consumer to the land, the farmers, the winemakers. They will be hosted at biodynamic, organic and regenerative farms, wineries, breweries, cideries, and distilleries across the province. The day after the consumer event is where we'll bring together the industry to farmer to chef meet and greets and really talk about ways to rebuild the resiliency of the industry. So our intention is to start doing that in the fall, of course, following all of the health and safety protocols. We're just waiting a couple more months before we make any official announcements as we watch to see how things roll out with not only the vaccine, but just spread. but we would be following the same protocols that were in place last summer with regards to that. And you know, the picnicking piece you asked, Julia, this is huge. Like even with festivals and events where you might not have food and beverage programming on site that day or evening or whatever, but you might be able to partner to create some programming where it's, if you're staying in the community, stay an extra day, have fun and play and picnic, and you could list out, you know, different places where people can pick up their picnics and places where they can enjoy them. So again, it doesn't necessarily, this is where I'm talking about that value add. And the value add could be that if you attend this event, then you get a voucher at any of these restaurants to pick up your picnic for the next day, something like that. I'm just spitballing ideas here.
Perfect. Anything, Taste of Oktoberfest has challenging local establishments to do their spin on Bavarian cuisine. There's a great idea as well. That's from Dave.
I love it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the opportunity to get super creative. I know that last fall in Prince Edward County, they, as part of their Countylicious program, expanded to do some really, really unique experiences and venues across the county, most anywhere between sort of 20 and 40 people. They were on farms and at breweries and at wineries, and they sold out. They did extremely well, again, because that consumer is looking for that connection to place, that connection to people, and that taste. And there's lots of great resources even within FEO's vault of awesome that can really help you determine and understand what it is that you need to do in these new times. One of the things that I also would be remiss in saying is that, you know, we really have to think about our environmental footprint and do our best to stay the course with doing better in that case, and really thinking about, you know, at our festivals and events, how can we implement a zero waste policies? How can we redirect any food waste? So as part of the efforts we've done over the last couple of years, we've partnered with Second Harvest to make sure any food that hasn't been consumed, that is still been handled properly, gets into their program so that we can redistribute food to people in need rather than having it end up in a landfill. And there are initiatives such as Second Harvest across the province. Many communities are now have initiatives where they can partner with different organizations to support that. I would also say, and this is part of why through the Great Taste of Ontario, we are paying it forward to organizations such as Second Harvest and Food Share, is to recognize that many organizations, as well as like including food banks, are really seeing a huge demand put on them during COVID, and will likely see that into the future as well as you know, while we get back to more of a stable economy. So really, again, thinking about how you can pay it forward or pay it back to those organizations to support them is really important.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Gentlemen of the Road Tour, Mumford and Sons, created a local wine and beer, all local food trucks. That was in Simcoe. Mm-hmm. Lots of great ideas.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we did a culinary retreat in Norfolk County, and we had, what's it called when you go to a football game and everybody drinks out of the back of their
tailgate?
Yeah, we had a tailgate party where we brought all of the local breweries, and they were all set up in the fields with their beer stations were their pickup trucks, so that people could line up there. And we did a tailgate party. We did axe throwing at that event. We had a massive campfire where people could roast marshmallows that were made, locally made. We had different food stations with chefs. Now, of course, because again of the safety protocols, the different ways of handling food is going to be considered. But this is also where, like, you know, if you're doing a smaller event, instead of you know, encouraging people to bring their own plates and cutlery and have proper washing stations so that you're not necessarily putting them in disposable vessels, and certainly stay the heck away from styrofoam and plastic. You know, it's scary to think about our landfills right now. And I know that so many operators have had to switch to that because there hasn't been enough supply of more sustainably produced products, but also because simply they've had to shift to that takeout model. But again, you know, Mother Nature is telling us she's not happy. We have to listen. Does this mean it's going to take a bit more time and it might cost some more? Sure, but it's our future, and our future is worth it. So Yeah, there's lots of things to be very mindful of about right now.
Absolutely.
I love that. Dave's telling me not to blow the little secrets. Well, I know it's tough. It's tough. But hey, look at Dave. Wouldn't we rather them go to Norfolk County than to go to Italy? Come on.
Yes,
of course we would.
Of course we would. Of course we would. Yeah.
Yeah, Donna's asked about biodegradable wine glasses. I haven't come across, well, that's not to say, I think Green Shift does a biodegradable glass, but it's not your sort of like typical wine glass. I think it's more of like the, you know, the ones that have like the stubby, like the little stubby bottom. Yeah. But there's also, you can get really great reusable wine glasses that are like the tumbler that you can put your thumb in. They are made out of reclaimed plastic. And if you get them branded, it could be the kind of thing that somebody gets and they take away with them. So it's single use with them. Right. And, you know, I like that, Julia, coming from conservation world. Yes, green. Well, we gotta do every little thing, right? Darren has a question for you, Deb. Do you guys have eco-friendly suppliers?
We have a couple of suppliers, Darren. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I will send them out to everybody. I'll send a list out to you that I have. There was somebody at our marketplace last year who was doing that. So yeah.
We get a lot of our green reusable stuff from Tap Fong in Toronto, which is in Chinatown. But you need to make sure you order well enough in advance, because there, again, like this is one of those situations right now, there's high demand, low supply, but that's Tap Fong. Go Vino, Kelly, that's exactly the ones I was thinking of, 100% Go Vino wine glasses. I used to, for Taste, the celebration of regional cuisine, that's what we moved into, was using those. Oh, great.
That's right, Marie. I was thinking Hillside Festival when you were talking about the bringing your own dishes and stuff, because they've got an amazing protocol for that. So
yeah, it's even now, like, for example, your water bottles, like if you're putting on experiences where you're trying to get away from people selling bottled water, is just to make sure you have enough water stations and then sell branded water bottles, so that people, if they don't show up with one, they have a nice takeaway, and then it's a product that they can use and they can fill up, and then you're not, you know, you're just have a different way of doing things. And, you know, yes, it may take some people a little while to get used to it, but that's okay. You know what? We all need to change for the good.
Yeah, we sure do.
Yeah, Down to Earth on Netflix. Bottled water vending machines. Okay.
Oh,
interesting. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. Okay, any other questions, comments from anybody? All right. Well, Rebecca, thank you. This was a wealth of information. Love chatting with you. Always do. And
it's my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll see you. You're speaking again. Is it this week or next week, right? You're going to be on a panel next week? Yeah, next week on a panel.
Yes, I'll be back. And Debbie, thanks so much to you and Dave and the whole team at FEO. It's always a pleasure to get an opportunity to speak to your awesome industry. I look forward to when FEO can come back in real life, because it's always so much fun. The annual conference, and always appreciate the support that you give to us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rebecca. And a quick reminder that the next schedule, so tomorrow is our panel discussions. There will be 3: the importance of risk management plan, emergency preparedness, insurance post-pandemic. And again, just thanks to our sponsors, Ticket Pro, Smart Serve, Event Hub, Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, Culture, OLG, Destination Ontario. And Rebecca, thank you very much. And before we sign off, are we going to do a turkey call?
I'll gobble. Okay.
Yay. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.